Normally I would have some choice music, but instead of just playing random choice music, we have a very special guest from Dubai, where it's very cold there in Dubai right now. It's incredibly chilly. Our friend Hugo, he is the co-founder of FLR. And for those of you that don't remember, I'm not going to step on his toes, but about 2 years ago, there was a lot of big excitement, especially in the XRP community, because there was a bunch of new kind of building in and around XRP, not just XRP, but that was kind of the main one, at least the way I understood it. And FLR, you guys had initiated an airdrop, which, by the way, I got some tokens. Thank you. And a lot of people did in some various exchanges, and they continued to build new and cool stuff, but we hadn't really heard about them too much through 2020. Then in 2021, more building, 2022, first part of 2022, lots of building. And that's where I'll leave that. Hugo, hello. Thank you for hanging out with us and letting us grill you on all things FLR. What's going on?
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm in Dubai. Sadly, we're just talking crypto. I can't have coffee this time of night. Yeah, no, it's great to meet you. I think it'd be awesome if you wouldn't mind if I just sort of address that airdrop.
Sure.
And kind of where we've come from there. So we recently released a roadmap, and the first sort of couple of paragraphs sort of cover sort of our development as a project. And what we started out trying to do in 2019 when we sort of started, and in 2020 when we released the white papers, was we really started out just trying to build a blockchain for a couple of tokens that were underserved by the market. So those are, the tokens that don't have native smart contracts, things like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, XRP, Stellar. These are the big tokens, with Bitcoin and XRP, the two largest out of that set. And what we realized as we were building it was that we could adapt some of the protocols we were building to be more of a general, essentially a communications layer for blockchains, so that we could create a generalized, a blockchain, a fast blockchain, but with a generalized set of tools for blockchain and non-blockchain interoperability. And really, we think that what we've created is essentially the best-in-class blockchain with a set of native tools for interoperability. So those tools are essentially the FLR time series oracle, which is how prices are put onto FLR, or in this case, in the early days, our CanaryNet Songbird. And so that's prices or other types of data which are probabilistic, meaning that you have lots of different sources and you have to try and find a sort of truth. So as you know, in blockchain, we have hundreds of different exchanges, and it's impossible to say, this is the price across the market. You can say this is the price on Binance. You can say this is the price on Huobi, et cetera, but you cannot say this is the true price. And so that's probabilistic data. And then we have a second protocol called the state connector, which is how FLR absorbs, takes in non-probabilistic data, so what's known as deterministic data, something that has happened in another system, whether that's a blockchain or a database, an open database in this question, because a blockchain nodes can't really connect to closed databases, in a way that is useful. So those are kind of the tools, and that's the question of what we build with it. So it's open for any developer to build whatever they like. So to give you some examples, let's say you wanted to build a predictions market. You could use our deterministic data source through the state connector to get the results of, let's say, sporting events or political events or any other form of event. You could build a smart contract that allows you to essentially create a predictions market. We're not doing that. We're building two very distinct protocols. The first is called the F-Asset protocol, and that's a way to get non-contract tokens onto FLR. So things like Bitcoin and XRP, Litecoin, Dogecoin, etc. And then a second protocol, which is a sort of universal bridging protocol for smart contract networks, and that's called Layer Cake. And that both allows tokens like Ethereum to move from Ethereum to, say, Solana, or UST to move, UST on Terra's network to move from Terra to, say, Ethereum or Solana or Polkadot or wherever, including FLR. But it also allows the F assets then to move from FLR to any other smart contract blockchain. And we think Layer Cake's a really interesting protocol.
So there's two things you guys are doing. So, because I think, you know what, let me do this. Let me real quick say hello to everyone, because this is kind of a deeper conversation in that it's not just FLR network doing this one thing. There are two kind of main things. One is taking non-smart contract assets and entering them into the FLR system. The other is smart contract platforms converting them over into kind of a place where they can all do business together.
So I like to think of it as we're building this technology layer that enables interoperability between essentially what's known as cross-chain. So you've got really good technologies for something called multi-chain. Multi-chain are things like Polkadot, Avalanche, and Cosmos. But these only provide strong interoperability between chains that are already within those ecosystems. So chains within Cosmos, or chains within Avalanche, or chains within Polkadot. There isn't a great interoperability mechanism for chains, say, connecting Avalanche to Polkadot or Avalanche to Cosmos. So that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build that generalized connection layer. So XRP to Cosmos, for instance, to give you an example.
Do you think would you say some of your industry competitors would be, I guess, Scale to some tiny extent is trying to kind of do this? I know that right now Rune, a Thor chain, was kind of, it was being pumped a few weeks ago, which is fine, but that was like the big, multi-chain. And I think maybe people don't necessarily look under the skirt and kind of see what's going on. I know Thor's had some fits and starts. They've tried to really launch big a couple times and they've had some meltdowns. So would you say those are kind of your competitors? Like, who would be the ecosystem that you're competing with?
So I think it's important to differentiate between swaps, which is, as I understand, Thorchain is principally a swap protocol, whereby you exchange, say, Bitcoin for Ethereum through Thorchain, and bridging. So being able to use your asset, specifically that asset, on another chain. And really, although you can do swaps with FLR, because we can have a DEX on FLR, we have many DEXs on FLR that allow you to swap between all those different tokens. And I'm sure someone will abstract away having to use that DEX directly with just being able to use it in a wallet, but that's not our responsibility today. We're just building the core protocols. But really, we're focused on bridging assets between different chains. And what we really, our competitors are kind of multi-sig bridges like Wormhole. And the problem with multi-sig bridges, to our mind, is that they're not decentralized. They have a collection of people. Well, essentially, it comes down to people, although they are corporate entities, that essentially control your funds. And that's both, risky, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get your funds back at the end of the day. But also, it's against the spirit and ethos of blockchain. What we're trying to do is to enable that in completely, or a really trust minimized way, such that you don't have to rely on a counterparty, because that's the whole point of blockchain.
Fair play. Okay, and in the ethos of decentralization. Let us recognize people who vampired away some of their day to come hang out with us. Over on Theta, we have Unsung, CC Brown, Scorpion, Gordon Bennett, Zeko Megatina. I did not get that right, but at some point you'll correct me. Feel free, anybody, if I butcher your name, just put the pronunciation guide, just like you'd find it in Webster's. Surf Slider, Arjun HR5. I'm sure there's a message in there. Debog, Hootie, what's going on? Okay, over on the YouTubes, and if you guys want to ever say anything, it's easier to connect to us over, unfortunately, YouTube, Twitter, and let's see, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Some of them, they post comments directly through StreamYard, which is nice because it pops up right in front of us. We get to see it. Okay, Erica, good to see you. Demayan, Florida Dan, what's going on? We were just chatting earlier. Joe Fernandez, ¿Qué onda, amigo? BZ, what up, buddy? Scorpion, Tim, Michael Murphy, Cross the Pond, what's going on? Dubai Money, Bitcoin, Candy, Scott, Patricia, other Mike. We got so many mics. We're our cup runneth over. We have an embarrassment of riches of mics. Casperia Cloud, what's going on? Brenda, Sylvia, Crypto for Life, of course. You could never say that too many times. XRP is you guys know I'm not an XRP hater. I'm a Ripple the company hater. But you know what? It's one good hire, one good fire. Any company can be turned around really in one press conference. It's surprising how the world works. Crypto Gamer, what's going on? Let's see, Suze, Frank, Jared, of course. Jared was listener number one in that when I first started doing these broadcasts 2 years, well, more than 2 years ago, it was like me and Jared and then Jerry. Me, Jared, and Jerry. And I think, Hugo, actually, I think you did an interview with Jerry Hall.
Yes. I think so.
He's the reason why you and I are talking, because I said, man, I don't want to talk to these Flare guys. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what my impression was, because I don't think I was alone. All I saw was that you guys were working closely with the XRP community. And then when they got hemmed up in court, you start thinking, well, dang it. I think everything attached to that might be. And then you guys were doing something with Litecoin. And I was like, no, not Charlie Lee. Also, he's the other dirtiest dude. And so what happened is, I think the headline got buried behind Brad and Charlie, which that has nothing to do with you guys.
All noise, no signal.
It's all noise, no signal. Yeah. So I'm guilty of that as well. So but one thing that I will do, because I'm a money maximalist. I'm not a token maximalist. I'm as hard on the assets that I like as I am on the assets that I don't like. And on the other side of it, when you find a good team, it's much more likely that a good team will turn around a project that maybe you didn't look deep enough into than that a bad team will correctly manage a product that you thought was good. And so, one of the ways that I look at a company is I start with the team. Like, you look at the team and the timing and tokenomics, look at the technology. Does that make sense? They have a, vibrant developer community. Can they entice developers, which, you and I are going to talk about. But the biggest thing is team. And if the team is good, then, you leverage the team and hopefully you can find success that way, especially in this space where there's not a lot of good teams. Unfortunately, it's the Wild West of crypto. Okay. So let me do this. Let me say hello to Chris. Let me say hello to Vincent. Let me say hello to Erica, Sniper Princess, Dr. Save Your Ass. Well played, sir. And then let me roll these opening non-specific banner, kind of opening, what we call it, our non-sponsored, sponsored, non-sponsored opening. And then we'll be right back and we will get into the guts. Well, I thought, we would be remiss if we didn't take a look at the markets. Well, here they are. They suck. Okay, now that we've done that and we've gotten past the Sunday blues of markets, let's get back to the fun stuff. Okay, everything's red. Everything's for anybody that's looking for some excuse to not feel bad about life. Yesterday around 2 p.m. my time, so East Coast time is going to be probably 5 in the evening. Bitcoin sold off pretty quickly. I don't know. There's never any one reason. A lot of times there's a variety of reasons. I did put out a little tweet that just said, and I don't know how you feel about this, Hugo. Let's talk about this just for a second. MicroStrategy recently, and I've been kind of vocal saying I thought this was silly of Mr. Saylor to borrow against Bitcoin they have in their treasury to use the Bitcoin to collateralize a loan to buy more Bitcoin because you scale volatility. I'm all for Bitcoin. I just think that kind of behavior has been harshly punished in the past.
Yep.
When you borrow a volatile asset to buy more of that volatile asset.
Well, the problem is if they come unstuck, then you're going to have a huge amount of liquidity on the market.
Ooh, in
a short period of time.
That's right. And let's say they had to have some forced stabilization event, which I don't know. MicroStrategy probably ride this into bankruptcy, but I don't know. And that's just my opinion. Jungle, what's up, buddy? So my opinion is you can't do stuff like that and also be a competent fiduciary. You can in your personal, like if you want to go borrow against go to Nexo or, go to Flare, go find a liquidity pool that you guys build and borrow against one to buy. Yeah, that's fine. An individual can gamble. I don't think you can gamble with publicly traded monies. So he's become vigilant a little bit. He's too orange pilled, more orange than that shirt of yours. And the problem is I don't think he's making sensible decisions that I would want a fiduciary to make. I don't want someone that manages a big company to be a risk taker. That's not really what I'm after. I want the more calm, the more peaceful, the benevolent. I want Gandhi, man. I don't want Bernie Madoff. What are your thoughts about that? And then I would love to talk a little bit about, so where do you see as far as DeFi making its way, because DeFi is still Wild West right now, and it's mostly a place where, and this gets into Oracle discussion too, of these flash attacks and things like that. So I guess give me an idea of where Flare goes in DeFi, but real quick first, what do you think about a lot of these fiduciaries taking undue kind of Bitcoin-centric risk?
I think whenever you've seen people do these kind of things before, and you can go back to like the bunker hunts in the 70s who tried to corner the silver market. They ride high for a little bit and tend to come unstuck. I doubt Michael Saylor is a systemic risk to the industry, though. If anything, it would be a short-term problem. If MicroStrategies went pop, it would likely be a short-term problem. Market would absorb the liquidity. You'd probably have 10% run down. But this is all speculation. I suspect the other aspect is there is an increasing expectation of higher interest rates, and that's always going to be negative for risk assets in the short term.
Do you see Bitcoin and I know a lot of the crypto space is risk it's undue risk asset, but do you think Bitcoin is a risk asset?
Personally, I've always seen Bitcoin as a hedge, not necessarily against inflation, but against, other aspects of life. So for instance, if you're a trucker in Canada, it didn't turn out necessarily to be a good hedge unless you kept it in your own wallet. It's a hedge against authoritarianism. It's how I've always seen it. But yeah, it is, however, it is highly correlated these days with risk markets, risk assets. So that can't be denied.
Do you think that's part? In my suspect, I guess the way I look at it is, I agree with you. I think Bitcoin is an inverse to bad behavior. just bad behavior anywhere you see in society, the argument to own some Bitcoin gets stronger.
Sure.
And I've always thought, Bitcoin won't make you, won't necessarily make you rich. It'll not make you poor, right? Now it could accidentally make you rich. You could see some unwind in a fiat currency that creates a run to Bitcoin and
Sure.
things like that. I don't think Bitcoin is the peer-to-peer payments network of the future. I think that technology, much like what you're building, people get it and do with it whatever they feel has the most value at that moment. And a lot of times it's not exactly what you might have thought as the designer of the technology.
Absolutely. And I think, it's like everything. You shouldn't look to one item to make you rich. You need to have some form of asset allocation strategy.
Let me ask you this as you guys, so let's pivot over into DeFi a bit. Okay, so give me the hierarchy of the token structure, because a lot of people they relate to things in terms of what is the token, what does it do? So give me kind of the breakdown of the tokens in your network and what do the tokens do?
So the FLR token, or essentially. So at the moment we have a canary network called Songbird, and that has a token called Songbird. And that token, the canary network is for testing, long-term testing of the FLR's technology. So we're building protocols that essentially are dealing with people's money, and so we wanted to have a network where we could test those protocols and we could allow people to use them, but they could be very amply forewarned that it's a test network, it's a canary network, that it's there, but there's risk. So please don't put all of your life savings into a protocol on that network. Specifically, things like FXRP, which we're going to be rolling out, fairly soon. In this case, SXRP, or the S assets, the Songbird assets. So that's XRP, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Stellar, eventually Bitcoin, things like that. But that's for testing of those protocols with regards to making them more robust, and then hopefully moving them over to FLR once they're considered highly robust and any issues that may turn up have been resolved. So that's Songbird. But one thing the Songbird network will have, we hope, is we're going to put in a governance process over this, will be that we're going to have a sort of bicameral legislature. So FLR's token has a governance role, but Songbird's token will play a governance role in FLR. And although I don't want to cover the entire proposal in this call, one of the things we are thinking about with regards to the proposal is that the Songbird token can be bonded, so staked, in order to essentially raise governance questions on FLR. So, for instance, the build of a new bridge or the build of a new F asset, maybe to a smaller F asset, people can stake Songbird tokens, and they can essentially say, well, we've staked, there'll be a staking competition, perhaps quarterly, whereby people stake a certain amount of tokens. Whoever is the winner of that staking contest gets to essentially ask the question. And they can essentially reward those stakers. Every bridge or every F asset that is built on FLR earns from FLR's incentive pool. And so they can reward those stakers with some of those earnings from that incentive pool. Like I said, it was a governance proposal at the moment, so I'm not going to go through all of the details, but just trying to elucidate sort of the role of what Songbird hopefully will be in the future if the governance proposal is accepted. So that's Songbird.
Real quick, can I interject? So could people kind of in their mind think kind of like what Kusama is?
Exactly, although more bicameral. So Kusama, I believe, if I'm correct, only applies to Kusama. So it doesn't, you don't bond your Kusama tokens to do something on the main Polkadot network. This is a bonding of Songbird tokens in order to achieve something on FLR. So in order to achieve the build of a bridge on FLR, or the build of something on FLR. And so there'll be, that's why I say it's bicameral, meaning, you have a lower house and an upper house. And so Songbird is the lower house to FLR's upper house. And that's kind of the idea we're going for here. So that's Songbird, and then FLR has its tokens, and those tokens are used for a number of different things. Primarily, obviously, for they're burnt when you make a transaction, but also for things like collateralizing the F assets. In terms of, so F assets are kind of what we call a delta hedged synthetic. So one of the main problems with a synthetic token, whereby you put in some collateral, you get another token, let's say DAI on Ethereum, is that you're immediately exposed to the price. The idea of a delta hedged is that you are long an asset on one chain, short an asset on another chain, and so you're less exposed to the price.
Are you just trying to collect the spread essentially? I mean, is that kind of like?
No, you get paid a fee. You get paid a fee for putting your collateral in. So
Okay.
we separate, unlike the synthetic where you're creating DAI, we say there's a collateral provider and there's a minter, and they can be different parties. They can be the same, but they can be different parties. And so the minter is paying a fee to the collateral provider. So it makes it actually really easy to access. So if you only have XRP, or you only have Bitcoin, or you only have Doge, you don't have to have a huge amount of FLR to create FDoge or FXRP or FBitcoin. You just need to pay a fee to someone to essentially use their collateral. And they collect the fees, they manage the collateral, and you get your Doge on FLR, so FDoge or FXRP.
This is good marketing, because I say FXRP and FDoge all the time.
Fair enough.
Okay, so this is interesting because it kind of reminds me of a carry trade, right?
Sure.
Where you sell it in the distance, you buy it right now, short it immediately, collect the arbitrage, collect the spreads. So this is kind of
you have a kind of implied basis between the two, between the underlying and the F asset. And that's actually the whole way that the underlying and the F asset meet, is that they will trade slightly differently, because there's always going to be slightly different liquidity profiles. But there'll be bounds with regards to the fees, beyond which, if they go above or below the bound, it will be profitable either to create or to destroy. So to create new units of F asset, or to destroy units of F asset in order to get the underlying. And so, in fact, we are using arbitrage to bound that price to the underlying.
Can you give us all a breakdown of, how many FLR tokens are there? And I know that there's the airdrop is at some point, you guys will continue that. I think there's 85% of it outstanding, right?
So there's not actually been any airdrop.
Well, there was the pre thing that happened on a few exchanges, right?
Well, that was actually nothing to do with us. That was essentially a derivative that those exchanges created and gave to their customers based on an expectation of us doing the airdrop in the future. We haven't dropped any FLR.
Okay, and real quick, let me just ask this little question. When or if, because there's obviously the onus, you don't have to do anything. You guys can do what makes the most sense for the company. But if you were to proceed with the airdrop, would it have been based on that snapshot taken about?
Oh no, we're definitely proceeding with the airdrop, and it's definitely based on the snapshot. It's just that we haven't released the network, so we can't airdrop the token. And the roadmap that came out, I think it was 10 days ago now, dictates, our desire to release the network and therefore start the airdrop on the 4th of July.
Interesting. So then now will you be working with those exchanges? For instance, BitTrue. In my case, I think I had 100 and it doesn't matter. I had some XRP. So if you would be, I'm guessing you would still be working with those same exchanges. I don't think.
Yeah. So all of the exchanges that signed up for the airdrop, we are working with them now to make sure that, that nothing's changed, and that they'll be distributing the token in a timely manner. We can't guarantee it because we're not in control of their policy.
Mm.
But we are working extremely hard to make sure that it's distributed in a timely manner. And we're also putting in a governance proposal quite soon over how the airdrop functions. So as you know, you get 15% on day one. That's not changing. The governance proposal is structured to remove the risk of an exchange not passing on the future airdrops. We're really concerned about that because, you know, we have found it quite difficult dealing with some exchanges. So we want to remove that risk. We also want to make a much, much stronger reason for people to engage with the network and to reward those people much, much higher for engaging with the network. So we have a governance proposal coming for the token, which we think will deal with a number of things that have been outlined to us in the period in which we've been building, and we think present a substantially better way to do the airdrop.
So you have a snapshot. So I'm going to spitball something. You have a snapshot,
sure.
And you can, that lives, right? We have that moment in history.
That's what the SGB distribution, the Songbird distribution was based on, and it's what the FLR distribution will be based on.
So could you not, using that, create a private wallet network directly on your platform, right? Similar to like what Near does, where you go and stake directly at Near with Near. Singularity Net, same thing. Stake directly at Singularity Net, your AGIX. Could you guys do the same thing and use the snapshot as the kind of the barrier to entry, and then let people, I mean, essentially manage in-house any subsequent airdrops or ancillary assets that airdrop against that airdrop?
So that's exactly what the governance proposal will be suggesting.
Oh, well, then we nailed it.
So yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. I'll take my check. You can just make that out to cash. Okay, so interesting. So tell me, what do the next 3-4 months look like for you guys as far as development, as far as kind of because if you're gearing up for mid-July, then I'm guessing there's a lot going on. I haven't seen a bunch of marketing. Is that a concern for you guys?
So we are, if you look at our team, it's predominantly technical. We've recently built a relatively small marketing capacity. We are ramping that up. We're also ramping up what we spend on marketing. And so we will be ramping up the marketing into the airdrop. Obviously, on the technical side, things are progressing very well. We've released Songbird, we've released the FTSO, we've released the stake connector. These are the principal components. We're just about to move to the consensus methodology that we've put forward, which uses the FTSOs as the validators. And we will be, so we're moving to that on Songbird. And then that is basically, the code is then frozen, going into an audit, beginning in the middle of May, ending in early June. The audit will tell us whether we can launch on July 4th or whether there's any issues that we need to address. The code base is huge and complex. And so, you know, we don't expect there to be any issues, but we will not launch unless, you know, the audit passes. And one of the reasons for that is that there are no reputable exchanges that will release a token without a strong audit. And so if people want to get their airdrop, then we have to do the audit. So it's quite simple.
Do you think enough of the audit process, because I know that DeFi is coming, well, DeFi is everywhere, right? Right now, DeFi is a bunch of spammy garbage that lights on fire because people take advantage of it. But at some point,
some of it is. Some of it's fantastic.
Yeah, a phoenix will rise from the ashes. We're going to learn a lot of lessons. We're going to learn a lot of things about liquidity pools, algorithmic stable coins, when they work, when they don't, and when there needs to be maybe a third-party mediator come in to prevent certain types of things. Like right now, liquidity pools get nuked a lot through flash loans, which in my opinion is not a hack. It's simply an exploit of usually either weak liquidity or weak code, one of the others. Do you think that there needs to be more auditing of DeFi products? And then, I mean, and then on the other side of it, how do you keep a liquidity pool liquid if it's not liquid? Like at some point you just some people need to admit, well, if there's only 20 bucks in USDT on the other side of this thing, it's going to get blown up. How do we kind of moving forward, how do we make sure there's enough liquidity where they can sustain flash attacks and things like that in the DeFi space? What are your thoughts?
I don't have a solution to that. I mean, if I had a solution to that, I'd be building a really good DeFi protocol. I think, and also, I've had my head down working on Flare, which is not DeFi. I mean, it has DeFi components in the way we use, collateral to create F assets. But it's essentially not a DeFi protocol. It's a consensus protocol, and it's essentially a very, very smart way to get state from other chains. So I certainly would not make myself out to be in any way a DeFi expert. But liquidity will ultimately, assuming that there is some form of efficient market hypothesis at play in crypto, and sometimes that seems impossible to believe, but liquidity will always move to the places where the friction of trading is the lowest.
Do you guys foresee a big DeFi ecosystem kind of emerging in Flare, and or I guess it would emerge first through some kind of Songbird project and then over into the Flare network?
Well, I certainly do. I'm not necessarily sure whether it has to emerge on Songbird first. As I said, Songbird's for testing. It's for testing our protocols. It may well emerge on Songbird as people can't wait to use it, perhaps. But I certainly see, what Flare's offering is it's offering DeFi with XRP, Doge, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Stellar. It's offering DeFi essentially with things that are predominantly underused. For instance, if you want to use Bitcoin today in DeFi, you have to go through essentially a bank or a custodian to get it onto a smart contract chain. And so there haven't been too many decentralized options before. What Flare is offering is a decentralized option of DeFi for these tokens. But additionally, although we expect DeFi to grow up on Flare, absolutely, why would it not? It's a fast chain and it's cheap to use. But we also enable those F assets to go to any other chain if there's a DeFi protocol you prefer on those chains. Having said that, that's always going to incur extra cost and extra time and extra movement and extra, extra bridging, which comes with a little bit of extra risk. Even though we think our bridging protocol is definitely one of the lower risk ones out there. So we don't expect huge amounts of the F assets to be flowing out of Flare. And that means that those F assets need to be used on Flare. Principally, they're going to be used for DeFi. But we also think they could be used for NFTs. So you'll be able to buy NFTs in XRP, you'll be able to buy NFTs directly in Doge, directly in the native currency that you care about. And also, one of the things we want to do is we want to enable DeFi in a way that is, I suppose you might call it DeFi, but it's like a different kind of DeFi. It's sort of lower risk, which is that the Flare asset itself earns a return. But also if you bridge Bitcoin or you bridge Doge or you bridge XRP to Flare, any of the F assets, they earn a daily reward for bridging that because they're consuming a huge amount of collateral. Then we reward people for bridging to Flare, for essentially minting onto Flare. And those reward streams can create a new form of DeFi or a different form of DeFi, which is kind of crowdfunding. So you can put your F asset or you can put your Flare into a contract. You don't risk the F asset directly. You don't risk the Flare directly. You're simply passing over the returns from those assets to some developer in a crowdfunding manner that then gives you back in return something in their protocol, probably a protocol token. And so we see that as a really nice way to introduce people that maybe haven't engaged with DeFi before to a lower risk type of DeFi, whereby you're funding projects, but you're not risking your principal. You're just giving them the returns from your principal in return for some share in their project.
Yeah, so that reminds me a lot of kind of like what they're doing over at Cardano right now, where
Absolutely.
you can go into the, the ISPOs, right? The stake pool offerings,
Absolutely.
where you can, point your tokens into a pool. They will trade you a percentage or all of your rewards for some of their native tokens at some
Absolutely.
point. Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we'll be able to do that with way more, way more assets. We'll be able to do that with Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Litecoin, Stellar, XRP, all of the assets that we're bridging to Flare, you'll be able to do that with.
Let me ask you this. So as far as the tokens, how many FLR tokens are there? What's the inflation? How many Songbird and what's the inflation?
So the initial amount of FLR is 100 billion. It's being distributed 15% on day one, and then slightly less than 3% per month thereafter for 36 months in the new in the new governance proposal. Then I'm suggesting a 5% in the new governance proposal. It's currently set at 10%. I'm suggesting a 5% inflation rate, so it's lower than the existing inflation rate in the world, or at least in the US. And that means that we have an expansionary token, but netted off against that is a number of things. So transactions are burnt, but also when you create an F asset, you have to pay a small fee to reserve collateral. That fee is also burnt. So we don't know if it'll add up to, if there's very, very high usage, then obviously it'll add up to potentially a deflationary effect. But it's the aim there is to just remove some of the effects of inflation. We have to be inflationary because we have these roles in the network, such as the data providers and the delegation of tokens to the data providers. And it's very important that the data that is provided to the network is good. And therefore, it's very necessary for people to be earning something from that. And there has to be a source of earnings, and that is obviously inflation.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I think currency elasticity is important. I think a lot of people get hung up on this thing. Great, Bitcoin has, will have 21 million. Some of them have been lost, some of them. But if you, go all the way to the logical conclusion of that with, math, what happens when there's one Bitcoin left and the whole world to use? So it creates an obviously absurd resolution.
Sure. I think for me, I think the way I see it is criticism of inflation of a fiat currency is very legitimate, but that's because we don't really control that inflation. We don't control the Fed. We don't control the Bank of England. We don't get to set the how many essentially new dollar tokens are put into existence. We have no rights over that. Whereas with Flare, or I'm sure with many other protocols, the token acts as a governance token, and the community can make governance proposals and vote on them as to the inflation rate. And I think really that's, so I don't think being a deflationary coin is totally necessary, but I do think giving people control over inflation is a completely different thing that's never been essentially enabled in existing economic systems.
Yeah, I think a currency, Jeff Snyder and I and Emil Kalinowski, we were talking about this. We're going to do another show here pretty soon too, but we were talking about the idea that an expansionary currency that did truly peg to inflation, if you can back out all the nonsense and what really is and isn't inflation. And that's a whole other discussion. But sure, if you could not just inflation but maybe price effect, maybe that's a better way to just, what is the price effect for the average person going to buy the things that they buy on a day-to-day basis? Okay. And prices do go up and there is a price effect, whether it's monetary inflation or not, there is a price effect, but also prices go down too. But also not just price effect, kind of flexibility in your currency, but a currency that may, in some cases expand, in some cases contract based on population growth or based on migration to certain kind of areas where there's more commerce. I mean, there is more than, everybody talks inflation because it's easy to talk, inflation, because gas prices. But yeah, I think, currencies of the future, mediums of exchange of the future, units of account of the future, maybe will expand and contract with a variety of factors. which could be population growth, which could be, commerce migration, which could be de-globalization or globalization or a variety of factors. And if you have a currency that's a big gooey mass that can expand and contract, that has currency elasticity in both directions, then I think you have something pretty cool, but we're not there yet.
But I think giving the currency holders an ability to exert some kind of control over inflation is a necessary thing. I think it's one of the beautiful things that crypto enables, because currently, if you're holding fiat, the only time you get to exert any form of control over inflation on the whole is when there's a currency collapse and when there's a revolution. And usually a currency collapse that leads to a revolution.
Well, then we get to the dictator's playbook, right? Print, buy as much stuff as you can and wait for them to come and storm the castle and see if you can get out alive with your riches.
Yeah, usually leg it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So we kind of know what you guys are aiming to achieve. Really quick, was the 100 billion a nod to XRP?
Oh, absolutely. We wanted to do a pretty much a one-to-one airdrop.
Fair play. Fair play. Well, you know what? I've made more. I got to be honest. I've made more off of my FLR tokens that I kind of played with since that was like 2 years ago now, right? Wasn't it? Not quite 2 years.
I think they did. I think they put out the synthetic, or what do they call it? An IOU.
A year and some months ago. Yeah.
Very quickly. Very quickly. We were not in control of that. You aren't in control of these things as a project. Exchanges can do whatever they like. I mean, it's nice to see it there. It certainly leads us to have positive expectations for the project. But yeah, I think it'll be. I think what we hope is that the token holders will engage with the project, which they have done massively on Songbird, which has been great. I mean, we don't have any cross-chain capabilities on Songbird yet. We're still building out those protocols, but the amount of transactions and the amount of development on the chain has been wonderful. And we expect when we release the cross-chain protocols that allow tokens like XRP, like Doge, like Bitcoin, to come to either Songbird in the first instance and FLR in the second instance, we expect that will lead to a massive, as people build TVL will signal to developers that it's a great place to come and start working. And it's an incredibly competitive market right now. There's a lot of chains, and so building the TVL on FLR or on Songbird is what will lead to more and more developers thinking, oh, there's a valid project, there's a viable project. Let's go and build on that. Now, we obviously already have some great early developers. We have more in the pipeline, which I won't mention until they wish to release those things. But yeah, we're certainly extremely excited about the future of what we're building.
Let me ask you, so let's talk about developers. So what are some of the other ways you're enticing new developers to kind of take a look over at FLR and Songbird and go, because right now you look and you say, okay, let me look at the top 10 projects. If I'm a developer and I'm trying to get paid, I need to build something that's going to launch on one of these high kind of velocity projects where there's already a lot of currency units floating around. There's a lot of investment floating around, and it's an easier path to profit. How do you combat that?
So a couple of things that, firstly, the thing that we do is we offer things that no one else can offer. And that is being able to acquire state from any chain without using essentially a centralized oracle, or to be able to acquire state from a database without using a centralized oracle. That then leads to other things in interoperability. So we offer a set of things that essentially developers can't access on other chains, and that's quite useful. But then we'll offer other things that developers can't access. So for instance, Doge, for instance, XRP, for instance, Stellar, Bitcoin, all those kind of things. So I think there's a first component, which is offering something useful and new. And then there's a second component, obviously, which developers are well aware of, which is things like grants. Many developers essentially are now at this moment in time grants farmers. They're moving from chain to chain to chain to get grants. I don't know how sticky that makes them over the long term, but it is something we have to play at, because otherwise it's simply a raw expectation of the industry at this point. We obviously have a grants. Well, we'll be launching our grants program. We have a grants program already, but we'll be launching a more formalized grants program in the next couple of weeks, detailing to developers kind of things that we would like to see built. And then the third thing I really think that is sort of novel, obviously Cardano has a similar method, but we'll be able to enable this for far more tokens than just ADA, is the crowdfunding aspect. So, three pillars. So technology, grants, crowdfunding. The technology lets developers build things that they couldn't build elsewhere. Grants is just a prerequisite, and crowdfunding is a great way to get the community involved with funding the developers.
So as far as that kind of development landscape, is that kind of where the idea? So you guys, you have a functional EVM, yes?
Yep. So a fast EVM.
Okay, so F assets, could people think of those as just wrapped assets? Is that kind of the way?
Yeah, yep. Exactly. Wrapped assets that are wrapped. So I dislike calling them wrapped assets, because people also call assets that are created by custodians wrapped. And for us, the work that's gone into building something that means that we don't just have a multi-sig, which owns your token. I mean, right. I can never stress this enough. When you wrap an asset through a custodian, or even through a bridge, that is using essentially a multi-sig like Wormhole, those people own your tokens. They're looking after those tokens on your behalf, and you are simply trusting them not to steal it. And that's to me, that's completely antithetical to the entire space. So we have to call them wrapped tokens, but they are decentralized wrapped tokens, and that's a very different premise. And so yes, obviously wrapped tokens.
Okay, so when you're enticing developers, you're saying, hey, come over here and work with us. What is the background that they need, or what kind of developers are you guys looking for?
So we're looking for a massive array of developers. Principally, we run EVMs, so Solidity developers, but we're also looking to partner with Rust developers and other developers from different VMs, because we want to build out Layer Cake as quickly as possible. Layer Cake is our bridging solution for smart contract networks, and we would like to partner with developers who can help us build those bridges as quickly as possible on the other chains. But there's a couple of categories that we're looking for. We're looking for DeFi, we're looking for crowdfunding, we're looking for innovative DeFi that works with things like NFTs. We're looking at people to help us with tooling, with UX. So we'll be putting out a generalized sort of governance, I guess, format in the next couple of weeks with regards to the to how grants work, what we're looking for, the kind of projects we're looking for, the kind of things we're interested in.
So in your heart of hearts, what do you hope by, let's say, end of July, hopefully you've had a successful rollout. What do you hope to accomplish by the end of July? How's the world going to look like for you guys?
So we'll have Flare Network up and running with both the FTSO on it and the state connector. I would imagine the F assets will be on Songbird. I would assume the F assets will be on Songbird in testing before Flare goes live. That will then allow us to move those F assets, or at least replicate the F assets on Flare, and that's kind of the first step. And then we'll be looking to sort of launch Layer Cake hopefully in Q3, Q4.
And then what should the community kind of hope for? So I know, whether or not DeFi and the way that DeFi integrates, any system that can hold any amount of currency units is going to have some kind of DeFi something. So let's set that aside for a second. But another important aspect is oracles. Obviously, you guys want to build your own Oracle network. I'm guessing you're not just waiting to sign a deal with Sergey and run Chainlink. So you
No,
guys,
we've already built our own Oracle system.
so it's running and capable.
It's running. You can look it up on flaremetrics.io. You can look it up on the Block Explorer. It's got close to 100 data providers in it. That's what people are delegating their tokens to and getting returns from. So it's proven to be quite robust so far. We of course welcome Chainlink and all the other Oracle providers, like API 3, also to offer their services on Flare. There's no reason why not to. They'll cover data that the FTSO doesn't necessarily cover. FTSO is optimally structured for price data. It's less well structured for other things. But yeah, we certainly wouldn't want to turn away other players. I mean, DeFi applications are free to use whatever Oracle they wish to use, and that's the choice of the developer. But we've built our own Oracle system. We're very happy with it. We are looking to expand the capabilities of it over time, both to make it faster, but also allow more more data providers and more data types. So, way more prices. So at the moment I think we're providing 12 or 13 prices. We'd like to be able to expand that to thousands. We'd like to be able to expand the number of data providers from where we are today, about 100, to thousands. And we're always thinking of ways to make it more robust.
Where do you just see the greater crypto space over the next year to 18 months? Where do you think we are?
I mean, it looks like we're reaching some form of mass adoption, right? I mean, it's a close to 2 trillion market, which gets you to the point where you think, right, this really isn't going away. I don't know of any other startup markets that have reached that level and then disappeared. It's possible, but I think we're getting to the point of mass adoption. I think NFTs, perhaps less on the art side and more on the kind of game assets, tradable assets side. Obviously, art assets are tradable, but they're kind of, they're not so, they're very unique, right? How many people want to buy a Bored Ape, out of the general population?
It's pretty specific, yeah.
Versus how many people want to buy like a power up in a video game, right? Or I think there's a very different quantum. I also think we'll see more things where more play to earn kind of things. I'd hope to see better structured play to earn mechanisms, as I think they've been poorly structured heretofore. I think NFTs are going to be an increasing part of the world. But what we're trying to achieve, as well as all those things, and we're a viable layer one for people to build on without needing cross-chain functionality. We're a great layer one for people to build on without needing cross-chain functionality. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring those assets that haven't been really involved in smart contracts before to a smart contract platform. And then we're trying to provide a much, much safer bridging methodology to connect up all of blockchain. And that's why we've recently changed our strapline, from unleashing value to connecting everything.
I like connecting better. When you unleash things, there's a good chance all sorts of, unintended consequences happen when you unleash in general. But yeah, so I'm interested in what you guys are doing. So I would love to have you come back, in the coming months and just kind of talk about progress and kind of let us know what's going on. I think it'd be very interesting. This is a project that, and again, I wasn't following it too closely because, once XRP got locked up and they've been fighting what they're fighting, and not XRP, but the token is unfortunately suffering from the sins of Brad and Chris.
Sure.
And so until that's kind of sorted, I think everybody's just kind of like, fishtailing, waiting for something to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will be behind us. But I kind of put you guys on the side burner too, because I was like, well, I guess they're in jail too, but obviously that's not the case.
We're not related to Ripple, other than them being a seed investor in Flare. and but we do have a good relationship with the Ripple team. But we are a project that has very different aims to Ripple and to the XRP ledger. We're trying to connect up the blockchain world, and we think that is of primary importance. They're trying to connect blockchain essentially to finance to bring down the cost of cross-border payments. Although the XRP ledger, of course, does many other things than that. But that is, I believe, Ripple's principal mission.
Well, cool. So
and I'd be delighted to come back.
That would be great. Let's do this again. And for anybody that's got questions, you can bombard me with questions, and I will try to gather those up, and I will just send them to Hugo.
Yeah, send them to me, and I'll see when we can answer them.
Also, Hugo is available through Twitter. You can obviously reach out to him through Twitter. Check out FLR. Obviously, it's right here, FLR.xyz. Go take a look. Start banging around. Keep it in the back of your mind. But I think as far as multi-chain, solving a variety of multi-chain issues, that's an open space. There's not really a leader yet. So I think that's good. It's great to be in a market where there's not really anybody directly kind of winning the market. It's not like when you compete, if FLR had said, we're going to take over NFTs, I would be, right?
Yeah, that wouldn't be our bag.
But yeah, so I think this is very interesting. I'm glad that you guys aren't kind of, we're going to go and we're going to change this. We're going to completely, when I see a lot of these big, big adjectives, big terms, like we're going to completely reinvent ... We're going to, I think sometimes specializing in a niche and just doing a very few things really, really well is much more valuable than trying to do everything that everyone's ever done better than everyone's ever done it, which tends to be a lot of the claims that you read on these various projects. So I think this is cool. I'm much more excited about following FLR than I was an hour and a half ago.
Great. I'm glad.
Well, good. We will do this again. Thanks for everybody that hung out with us. And we will continue to kind of update you and talk about, and I'll dig a little bit into kind of the way that this token might make sense in your portfolio. So we'll be tracking it and following it. And we wish you guys the greatest success. And I hope to have you back soon and regale us with news of your new successes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Remember, stay in school. Don't do drugs. Don't do anything my poor insolvent drunk strung it on meth grandmother wouldn't do, which, as you know, is very little. And we will see you again very soon.